I was standing in my own blood when I realized that the woman who gave birth to me had just tried to kill me. The shard of glass from my shattered phone was still trembling in her hand, my blood dripping from its jagged edge, and she was smiling. Not the practiced, sweet smile she showed to neighbors and church friends. This was different. This smile was pure, unfiltered satisfaction, like she had finally done what she had been dreaming about for years. My cheek was on fire, warm blood running down my neck and soaking into my shirt collar, and all I could think was, how did I not see this coming? If you're hearing this story and thinking this sounds insane, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you gets so much worse before it gets better. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with a toxic family member, because I promise you, you're not alone. But let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Because the night my mother attacked me with broken glass wasn't the start of the story. It was just the moment when her mask finally cracked wide enough for everyone else to see what I had been living with for 24 years. 3 weeks before that bloody night, I had been so hopeful, so stupidly optimistic that maybe, just maybe, things were getting better. I was 24 years old, living at home in our picture-perfect suburban house in a neighborhood where every lawn was manicured and every family pretended to be happy. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Miller, were that couple everyone envied. Mom volunteered at the church, hosted book clubs, and always had fresh cookies for the neighbors. Dad was a successful accountant with his own firm downtown. They drove matching luxury SUVs, and their Christmas cards were the kind that made other families feel inadequate. And then there was me, Chloe, the daughter who could never quite measure up. I had graduated from college 2 years earlier with a degree in fine arts, which in my mother's eyes was about as useful as a degree in breathing. While my high school friends were climbing corporate ladders and getting engaged, I was trying to build a photography business from my childhood bedroom, taking on small projects and slowly building a portfolio. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and for the first time in my life, I was doing something that made me feel alive. I had invited my 2 best friends over that Tuesday evening. Maya had been my roommate in college, a fierce, no-nonsense pre-law student who never took crap from anyone. Liam was the guy who sat next to me in Introduction to Photography freshman year and became my creative soulmate, always pushing me to take risks with my art. We were sitting in the living room, and I was showing them photos from a small project I had just completed for a local nonprofit. The images were portraits of elderly residents at a community center, and I was proud of them. Really proud. For once, I felt like maybe I was actually good at something. The 3 of us were laughing about something stupid Liam had said, music playing softly from my laptop, when I heard the front door open. The laughter died in my throat. I knew that sound. The sharp click of her heels on the hardwood floor, the particular way she set down her purse, the almost silent sigh that meant she was already annoyed before she even saw what there was to be annoyed about. My mother was home early from her volunteer shift at the church. Eleanor walked into the living room, and I watched her face transform. The warm smile she must have been wearing out in the world froze, then melted into something cold and sharp. She didn't greet my friends. She didn't say hello to me. The music that had been filling the room seemed to cut off mid-note, even though no one had touched the laptop. "Sweetie," her voice dripped with that artificial honey that made my skin crawl. "You didn't tell me we were having guests. The house looks like a pigsty." She gestured vaguely at the living room, which was perfectly clean except for our coffee cups and my camera bag. Her eyes lingered on Maya and Liam with the kind of look you'd give something unpleasant you found on the bottom of your shoe. "They're just my friends, Mom." I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to project a confidence I absolutely did not feel. "We'll keep the noise down." I saw Maya's hand tighten around her coffee mug. She had met my mother exactly twice before, and both times she had pulled me aside afterward and said, "Chloe, that woman is toxic." I had always made excuses. "She's just old-fashioned." "She means well. She's stressed." Eleanor let out a small, cruel laugh and walked over to where I had my camera and laptop set up on the coffee table. "Still playing with these toys, I see. At 24, you should have a real job in a real office, not living like a child leeching off your parents." She picked up one of my cameras, a used Canon I had saved for months to buy, and turned it over in her hands like it was something distasteful. "When do you plan to grow up, Chloe?" Before I could respond, my father's footsteps echoed from the stairs. Richard came down with his phone already in his hand, and I felt my stomach drop. I knew what was coming. My father had a habit, a sick little hobby really, of filming me whenever my mother went on one of her tirades. He called it holding me accountable. I called it evidence of abuse that I was too scared to do anything about. Eleanor's right. he said, not even looking at me, already framing his shot. We should document this, so she can see how pathetic and ungrateful she looks, turning our home into a hangout spot for her deadbeat friends. He actually said deadbeat friends, while Liam, who was working on his master's degree in digital media, and Maya, who had a full scholarship to law school, sat right there. Liam stood up slowly, his face red. Sir, ma'am, I think we should go. His voice was polite but strained, and I could see he was trying to de-escalate the situation. That was Liam. Always the peacemaker. Eleanor spun on him so fast, her perfectly styled blonde hair whipped around her shoulders. You shut your mouth. This is my family business. And you, Chloe, are the embarrassment of this family. Every word was enunciated clearly, designed to cut as deeply as possible. I had heard variations of this speech my entire life, but never in front of my friends, never so publicly. That was when she saw my phone sitting on the coffee table. It was new, or new to me at least. I had bought it on an installment plan just 2 weeks earlier because I needed something with a better camera for my photography business. I needed it to communicate with clients, to edit photos on the go, to run my barely existent social media accounts that were supposed to help me get noticed. It represented hope. It represented my future. Always glued to this thing, Eleanor snarled, snatching it up. Living a fake life online, pretending you're somebody special, pretending you have a real career. Her fingers flew across the screen, and I realized with horror that she knew my passcode. Of course she did. She had demanded it years ago, said it was her house, her rules, and if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't mind. I had been too young and too conditioned to say no. She opened my Instagram, my messages with Maya and Liam, and started reading them out loud in a mocking sing-song voice. Oh, Chloe is so talented. Oh, Chloe is going to make it big one day. Oh, your parents don't understand your vision. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. This is what you do all day? Sit around while we pay for everything, getting your little friends to blow smoke up your ass? Mom, please. I stood up, my hands shaking. Don't. I need that for work. My voice came out small and desperate, exactly the way I hated, exactly the way that proved everything she said about me being weak and childish. What happened next felt like it unfolded in slow motion and at light speed simultaneously. Eleanor's face twisted into something I had never seen before, something beyond anger, beyond cruelty. It was rage in its purest form, and it was directed entirely at me. She pulled her arm back and hurled my phone at the wall with such force that I heard the sickening crunch of breaking glass and plastic even over Maya's scream. The phone hit the wall and exploded into pieces. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, and chunks of the case broke off and scattered across the hardwood floor. But Eleanor wasn't done. She walked over to the wreckage, and in the awful silence that followed, she bent down and picked up the largest shard of broken screen, a piece maybe 3 inches long with a wicked sharp edge that glinted in the lamplight. I should have run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to move, to get away, to protect myself. But I was frozen, paralyzed by 24 years of conditioning that told me to stand still, take it, don't make it worse, don't provoke her, wait for it to be over. She came at me with that piece of broken glass raised, and I saw my father behind her, still filming, his face a mask of shock but not shock enough to actually stop what was happening. Maya was screaming. Liam was shouting something, and my mother's hand swung toward my face. I felt the sharp, burning pain before I understood what had happened. The glass shard sliced across my cheek, just below my left eye, and then the world turned red. Literally red. Blood poured down my face, hot and sticky, and I lifted my hand to my cheek in disbelief. When I pulled my fingers away, they were covered in crimson. I'm calling 911. Liam's voice cut through the chaos, and he had his phone out, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. This is assault. This is fucking assault, and I'm not staying quiet about it. That snapped Richard out of his filming trance. He lunged across the room and grabbed for Liam's phone, his carefully maintained accountant composure completely shattered. Give me that. You don't understand. She didn't mean it. Chloe provoked her. They wrestled for the phone while Maya ran to me, pressing the sleeve of her cardigan against my bleeding face. And my mother? Eleanor stood in the middle of the chaos she had created, the bloody piece of broken glass still in her hand, and she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a shocked laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had finally released something they had been holding in for too long. It was the sound of a person who had dropped all pretense of sanity. I don't remember much of the next hour. Maya told me later that Liam did manage to call the police, but my father convinced him to hang up before they could trace the call, promising that they would take me to the hospital themselves, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that we could handle this as a family. Liam and Maya were eventually ushered out, but not before Maya gripped my hand and whispered, "We're not leaving you in this, I promise." My father drove me to an urgent care center 20 minutes away, far enough that no one would know our family. Eleanor stayed home. She didn't apologize. She didn't come with us. The doctor asked what happened, and Richard answered smoothly that I had tripped and fallen on a broken picture frame. The lie rolled off his tongue like he had practiced it. I sat there, numb, and said nothing to contradict him. 7 stitches. That's what my mother's love cost me. 7 small black stitches across my cheekbone. When we got home, Eleanor was in the kitchen, cleaning. She had swept up every piece of my broken phone. She had wiped the spot where my blood had dripped on the floor. She had erased the evidence of her crime from the physical space, like it had never happened. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Go to your room, Chloe. We'll discuss this in the morning." And like the well-trained daughter I had been raised to be, I went. I sat on my bed in the dark, my cheek throbbing despite the painkillers the doctor had given me, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Crack. Like ice that's been frozen solid starting to splinter under pressure. For the first time in my life, the fear I felt wasn't bigger than the anger. For the first time, I looked around my childhood bedroom, at the posters I had never been allowed to choose myself, at the books on the shelf my mother had deemed appropriate, at the pale pink walls she had painted when I was 7 and never let me change, and I realized I was living in a prison. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. Around 3 in the morning, when I was certain both my parents were asleep, I crept out of my room with a USB drive I had bought months ago for backing up photos. My father's office was at the end of the hall, and I knew he never locked it because who would dare invade Richard Miller's private space? Me. That's who. His computer was still on, the screensaver casting a faint blue glow across the room. I didn't have to search for the video. My father was meticulous about organization, probably the one trait I had actually inherited from him. There was a folder on his desktop labeled Family Videos, and inside it, a subfolder labeled Chloe Discipline. My hands shook as I clicked it open. There were dozens of videos, years worth. Videos of my mother screaming at me for getting a B+ in math in 8th grade. Videos of her smashing my birthday cake when I was 16 because I had invited friends over without asking first. Videos of her cutting up my clothes with scissors when I was 19 and had dared to buy something she deemed too revealing. And there, at the top, was tonight's video, time-stamped and saved as if it were evidence my father was proud of. I copied everything onto the USB drive. Then I opened his email, knowing he used the same password for everything, the street we lived on plus his birth year, pathetically easy to guess. I found emails he had sent to relatives, to my aunt and uncle, to my maternal grandmother, all with the same theme. Chloe is troubled. Chloe is ungrateful. Eleanor tries so hard, but Chloe makes it impossible. We're at our wits' end. I took screenshots of all of them. Evidence. I was gathering evidence like I was building a legal case. Because maybe I was. I went back to my room and packed a bag. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my backup camera, my laptop, charging cables, my social security card and birth certificate that I had hidden away years ago just in case. And a small box that contained every bit of jewelry my maternal grandmother had given me before she died. The only person in my family who had ever made me feel loved. Then I opened my window, the same window I used to stare out of as a kid and dream about running away, and I climbed out into the cool night air. I was 24 years old, and I was finally running away from home. Maya lived in a small apartment near campus, about a 30-minute walk from my house. I walked the whole way with my bag on my back and my hand pressed against the bandage on my face. Every step felt like rebellion. Every step felt like freedom. When I knocked on her door at 4:30 in the morning, she opened it immediately, like she had been waiting for me. She probably had been. She pulled me inside, sat me down on her second-hand couch, and made me tea. I didn't drink. Liam showed up 20 minutes later. Maya had texted him the moment I arrived. The 3 of us sat in Maya's tiny living room as the sun started to come up, and we made a plan. "You can't go back there," Maya said, her voice fierce and certain. "What happened tonight wasn't discipline, Chloe. It was abuse. It's always been abuse. You know that, right?" She waited until I nodded, even though it took me a long time to do it. Saying it out loud, acknowledging it, felt like betraying some fundamental rule I had been raised with. You don't air your family's dirty laundry. You don't speak badly of your parents. You honor your father and mother. Except what kind of honor was there in almost being blinded by a shard of broken glass? Liam had been on the phone in Maya's bedroom, and when he came back out, he looked energized in a way I hadn't seen before. I called Professor Hendricks, my advisor from undergrad. He teaches law now, family law specifically. I told him what happened, and he said we have a case, a strong one. That video your dad took? That's evidence. The hospital record? Evidence. The witnesses, me and Maya? Evidence. But he said we need to be smart about this. He looked at me seriously. We can't just go to the police right now. Your parents have money, they have a reputation, they have a lawyer on retainer probably. They'll spin this. They'll say you're mentally unstable, that you attacked your mother first, something. We need to control the narrative. Control the narrative. Those 3 words stuck with me. My parents had been controlling the narrative my entire life. The narrative that they were perfect parents with a difficult daughter. The narrative that I was the problem. The narrative that if I just tried harder, behaved better, wanted less, I would finally earn their love. What if I could change the narrative? We spent the next 2 days holed up in Maya's apartment, planning. I told them everything. Every degrading comment, every public humiliation, every time my mother had destroyed something I loved, every time my father had stood by and filmed it like I was some kind of reality TV villain instead of his daughter. Maya took notes. Liam organized the files from the USB drive. And slowly, we built a strategy. On the 3rd day, I woke up to 57 missed calls from my parents. 33 from my mother, 24 from my father. I had 17 voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. Maya did it for me, putting them on speaker so we could all hear. The first few were my father, his voice tense and controlled. Chloe, come home immediately. We need to discuss your behavior. Your mother is very upset. You're being incredibly selfish. Then my mother's voice, higher pitched, on the edge of hysteria. How dare you abandon us, after everything we've done for you? You ungrateful little bitch. We gave you everything. But by voicemail number 12, their strategy had shifted. I could hear it in my father's calculated tone. Sweetheart, we overreacted. We're sorry. Your mother is just under a lot of stress. Come home and we can work this out as a family. We love you. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I watched from Maya's laptop as my mother made her move. 3 days after I left, she posted on Facebook. Not just her personal page, but in several neighborhood groups, church groups, local community pages. The post was a masterpiece of manipulation, and I had to admit, if I hadn't lived through what actually happened, I might have believed it too. The post was accompanied by a photo of my parents looking distraught, my mother's eyes red from crying, my father's arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Heavy hearts tonight." Our daughter Chloe has always been a challenging child, but we never stopped loving her. Recently, she's fallen in with a bad crowd and has become increasingly rebellious and verbally abusive toward us. Last week, she physically attacked me in our home, and when we tried to talk to her about getting help, she ran away. We're terrified for her safety. If anyone has information about where she might be, please contact us. We just want our baby girl to come home and get the help she needs. Prayers appreciated. Attached to the post was a video. My father's video, but edited. Heavily edited. It showed me standing in the living room, my face twisted in anger, shouting, but the audio was cut so you couldn't hear what I was actually saying or what had provoked it. It showed Maya and Liam looking confrontational. It showed my mother reaching for my phone, but it cut away before you could see her throw it, before you could see her come at me with the broken glass. The video ended with a shot of my mother crying on the couch, my father comforting her. It was a complete fabrication of reality, and it was brilliant in its cruelty. The post went viral in our community. Within hours, there were hundreds of comments. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Praying for your family. Kids these days have no respect. You've been such wonderful parents. She doesn't know how lucky she is. I saw her hanging around with those friends. I knew they were trouble. Tough love, Eleanor. Sometimes you have to let them hit rock bottom." A few people, bless them, asked careful questions. "Are you sure there isn't more to the story? Have you considered family therapy?" But they were drowned out by the chorus of support for my parents, for the poor suffering parents of an ungrateful, violent daughter. I sat in Maya's apartment and watched my reputation, my life, burn to the ground in real time. I got messages, dozens of them. From people I had known in high school, from neighbors, from women who went to church with my mother. Most were ugly. You should be ashamed of yourself. How could you hurt your mother like this? I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed your family. Some tried to be helpful in a misguided way. Chloe, whatever you're going through, drugs aren't the answer. Please get help. One message, from a girl I had been friends with in middle school before my mother decided she was a bad influence and forbade me from seeing her, simply said, I believe you. Whatever really happened, I believe you. Call me if you need anything. I cried when I read that one. Maya put her hand on my shoulder as I stared at the screen, watching the comments pile up. They think they've won, she said quietly. Let them think that. We're going to show them who you really are. We worked for another week. Liam, who was a genius with web design, built a simple, clean website. One page. We called it The Miller Truth. At the top was a photo of me, current, showing the still healing cut on my face, the stitches visible. Below that, in clear, unemotional text, I told my story. Not dramatically, not angrily, just factually. My name is Chloe Miller. For 24 years, I have been emotionally and verbally abused by my mother, Eleanor Miller, with my father Richard Miller as a willing participant and documentarian. What you're about to see is the truth. Then came the videos, the unedited versions, all of them. The video from the night she attacked me, showing the full sequence. Her smashing my phone, her picking up the glass, her coming at me, my father filming instead of stopping her, the sound of Maya and Liam screaming, the blood. We didn't shy away from any of it. We also included older videos. Christmas morning when I was 17 and she threw my new laptop across the room because I had thanked my father first instead of her. My high school graduation party where she announced in front of everyone that I was a disappointment. My 21st birthday where she cut up the dress I had bought with my own money because she said it made me look like a slut. We included the screenshots of the emails, the messages to relatives painting me as troubled and difficult, the text exchanges between my parents where they strategized about how to keep me dependent on them, how to undermine my confidence, how to make sure I never became successful enough to leave. At the bottom of the page, I wrote a final paragraph. I didn't want to share this. I wanted to heal privately, to move on, to let the past stay in the past. But my parents have chosen to wage a public campaign to destroy my credibility and paint themselves as victims. They edited reality to fit their narrative and weaponized our community against me. So here is the unedited reality. I am not a perfect daughter. I have made mistakes. But I did not deserve this. No one deserves this. If you are in an abusive relationship, whether with a parent, partner, or anyone else, please know that it's not your fault. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve to be believed. I am done being silent. I am done protecting people who hurt me. This is my truth. We launched the website on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the night my mother attacked me. Maya shared the link directly in the comments of my mother's Facebook post. Within minutes, the entire tone of the conversation shifted. The first comments were shocked. Oh my God, that video. Did you see what she did? She actually attacked her with glass. This is insane. Then came the apologies. Chloe, I'm so sorry I believed your parents. I should have asked more questions. Then the anger, directed where it should have been all along. Eleanor Miller should be in jail. How dare they lie to us? I can't believe we fell for it. The domino effect was spectacular and terrible to watch. Friends of my parents started deleting their supportive comments. My mother's post was reported so many times that Facebook took it down for containing manipulated media. Someone screenshotted the whole thing before it disappeared and shared it with commentary about how this was a textbook example of parental abuse and gaslighting. That screenshot was shared thousands of times. Local news picked it up. Not the major networks, but a small community news website ran a story titled, "Local Woman Exposes Parental Abuse After Viral Facebook Campaign Backfires." They linked to my website. They interviewed a domestic violence expert who explained coercive control and how abusers often appear charming to outsiders. The expert didn't name my parents specifically, but everyone knew who she was talking about. And then the neighbors started coming forward. Mark and Jennifer Peterson, who lived 3 houses down and whose kids I used to babysit, released a statement saying they had called the police twice over the years because of screaming coming from our house. But nothing had ever been done. Mrs. Chen from across the street admitted she had seen my mother slap me in the driveway when I was 15. A woman who used to work with my father said he had once shown her a video of Eleanor disciplining me and laughed about it, and she had been so disturbed she reported it to HR. But nothing came of it because he was a partner in the firm. The evidence piled up. The truth, once it started coming out, couldn't be stopped. It was like a dam had broken, and everyone who had seen glimpses of my parents' true nature over the years finally felt safe enough to speak up. 4 days after we launched the website, 2 police officers showed up at Maya's apartment. My heart stopped when I opened the door and saw the uniforms. I thought my parents had convinced them to arrest me for something. Instead, the older officer, a woman with kind eyes named Officer Sarah Rodriguez, asked if I was Chloe Miller and if I was safe. When I said yes, she told me they were opening an investigation into my mother for assault and battery, and my father for being an accessory. They had seen the videos. They had taken statements from Maya and Liam. They had talked to Mark Peterson. They wanted my statement too. I gave it. All of it. Every detail I could remember. They took photos of my healing cut. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. Officer Rodriguez told me they were also issuing an emergency restraining order against both my parents, effective immediately. Neither of them could contact me or come within 500 feet of me. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The fallout from my parents was swift and brutal. Within a week, my mother was fired from her volunteer position at the church. The pastor released a statement saying they were shocked and saddened by the revelations and couldn't in good conscience allow someone who had committed such acts to represent their community. My father's accounting firm put him on indefinite administrative leave pending the outcome of the police investigation. Several clients pulled their business. The neighbors who had been so quick to defend them now crossed the street to avoid them. The story made its way to a regional news outlet, then to a few national websites that covered viral stories. My website got over 100,000 views in the first month. I received thousands of messages, and while some were cruel, most were supportive. People shared their own stories of family abuse. People thanked me for being brave. People told me I had inspired them to leave their own toxic situations. And then something unexpected happened. A woman named Dr. Patricia Summers reached out to me through the website's contact form. She ran a nonprofit organization called Healing Voices that supported survivors of domestic and family violence. She had seen my story and wanted to know if I would be interested in participating in a project. They were creating a photography exhibition called Invisible Scars, featuring portraits and stories of abuse survivors. Each participant would work with a professional photographer to create a portrait that represented their journey, and they would write their own accompanying narrative. Or, Dr. Summers wrote, "Since you're a photographer yourself, you could photograph other survivors and we could include a self-portrait of your own. We'll pay you for your work. We'll provide therapy support throughout the process. And we'll make sure your voice, and the voices of other survivors, are heard." I said yes. Of course I said yes. This was the opportunity I had been dreaming of, a real photography project with a real organization, and it was about something that mattered deeply to me. Over the next 3 months, I threw myself into the work. I met with 15 other survivors, people of all ages and backgrounds. I photographed them in locations that felt meaningful to them. A woman in her childhood bedroom that she had finally reclaimed after moving her abusive mother into a nursing home. A man standing in front of the courthouse where he had won custody of his kids from his violent ex-wife. A teenager in their school's art room, the one place they felt safe from their father's rage. Each photo shoot was an act of healing, both for them and for me. My self-portrait was taken in Maya's apartment. In front of the window I had climbed through that night, I ran away. I'm looking at the camera head-on, the scar on my cheek visible but healing. I'm not smiling, but I'm not crying either. I look strong. I look like a survivor. The accompanying text was just one line. I am no longer my mother's daughter. I am my own person. The exhibition opened at a prestigious gallery in the city on a Saturday evening in May, almost exactly 1 year after the night my mother attacked me. The gallery was packed. Dr. Summers had promoted it heavily, and the local press showed up in force because my story had been so public. Maya and Liam stood with me as I stared at my work, 15 large-scale portraits hanging on pristine white walls, each one telling a story of pain and resilience. People moved through the space quietly, reading the stories, crying, talking in hushed tones. A reporter from a major newspaper interviewed me for 30 minutes about the project and my own journey. A photography magazine asked to feature the series in their next issue. 3 different galleries in other cities reached out about hosting the exhibition. It was the proudest moment of my life. Halfway through the evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me step outside into the gallery's courtyard and pick up. The voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in months. Chloe. It was my father. His voice sounded decades older than I remembered, thin and brittle like old paper. Please listen to me. Your mother, she's not doing well. The trial is next month and she's falling apart. She won't eat, she won't sleep, she just sits and stares at the wall. The lawyer says if you would just drop the charges, agree to family therapy, say it was all a misunderstanding, they'd let her plead to a lesser charge. She could do community service instead of jail time. She's not herself anymore, Chloe. You have to understand, this isn't who she really is. I stood there in the courtyard, fairy lights strung above me, the sounds of my gallery opening drifting through the open door behind me, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no guilt. Just a vast, empty peace. I thought about everything I wanted to say. About how she had never been a mother to me, only a tormentor. About how Dad had enabled her, recorded her abuse, used it as a weapon to control me. About how they had tried to destroy my reputation to save their own. About how I had almost let them succeed in making me believe I was worthless. Instead, I said this. Dad, you had 24 years to be a father. You chose to be a cameraman instead. You documented my abuse like it was entertainment. You stood by and watched her hurt me over and over again. And you never once protected me. Mom didn't lose herself. This is who she's always been. You both just got used to the fact that no one was watching, that I was too scared to tell anyone, that your perfect little house and your perfect little reputation would keep you safe forever. But now everyone's watching. Now everyone knows the truth. And I don't owe either of you anything. I don't owe you forgiveness. I don't owe you a second chance. I don't owe you my silence. I survived you. That's all I owed myself, and I did it. There was silence on the other end. Then, please, Chloe, don't do this to us. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. I walked back into the gallery, where Maya handed me a glass of champagne, and Liam pulled me into a hug. A woman approached me a moment later, tears streaming down her face, and thanked me for giving her the courage to leave her own abusive mother. A photography professor from the university asked if I'd be interested in teaching a workshop for their students. A man from a publishing house gave me his card and said they were looking for photographers for a book about family trauma and healing. My new life was happening all around me, and I was finally free to live it. The trial happened 2 months later. I testified. I showed the jury the videos, the emails, the text messages, the hospital records. My mother sat at the defense table in a conservative dress, hair pulled back, looking nothing like the wild-eyed woman who had attacked me with broken glass. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a woman who had snapped under the pressure of raising a difficult child, who had made one terrible mistake. The jury didn't buy it. Eleanor Miller was convicted of assault and battery. She received 18 months in county jail, 3 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me for 10 years. My father, Richard, took a plea deal. He was convicted of being an accessory to domestic violence and received probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. His accounting license was suspended. The pristine reputation they had spent decades building was destroyed in a matter of months. I wish I could say I felt triumphant watching the verdict come in, but the truth was more complicated. I felt relieved. I felt validated. But I also felt a strange kind of grief for the parents I had always wished I could have had, the ones who existed only in my imagination, the ones who would have been proud of me instead of trying to break me. That version of Eleanor and Richard Miller had never existed, and accepting that was its own kind of death. But life, my real life, was just beginning. The Invisible Scars exhibition traveled to 4 more cities over the next year. I was hired by 2 more nonprofits to document their work. A gallery in New York offered me a solo show. I moved out of Maya's apartment and into a small studio of my own. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I chose myself. Every photo on the wall was one I had taken. For the first time in my life, I woke up in the morning and didn't feel that crushing weight of dread, wondering what I would do wrong that day, what would set her off, how I could make myself smaller and quieter and less of a burden. I started therapy. Real therapy with a trauma specialist who understood family abuse. Dr. Patel helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't discipline or tough love or high standards. It was systematic psychological warfare designed to keep me dependent and powerless. She helped me recognize the patterns I had internalized, the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I was selfish for having needs, that I should be grateful for crumbs of affection. Slowly, painfully, I learned to silence that voice and replace it with my own. I reconnected with relatives my mother had alienated over the years. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister, reached out after seeing the news. She told me she had tried to intervene when I was younger, had confronted Eleanor about her treatment of me, and had been banned from seeing me as a result. We met for coffee and she cried and apologized for not doing more. I told her it wasn't her fault, that Eleanor had been a master manipulator, that she had isolated me from anyone who might have helped. Susan and I have lunch now once a month. She's become the maternal figure I never had. My maternal grandmother's best friend, Mrs. Roberta Chen. Not the neighbor, but a different Mrs. Chen, who had been frozen out of our lives years ago, sent me a box of letters. They were letters my grandmother had written to me before she died, one for each birthday from age 25 to 35. My mother had intercepted them and never given them to me. Mrs. Chen had kept copies, hoping that one day she would have a chance to deliver them. I read them all in one sitting, sobbing, as my grandmother told me in her elegant handwriting how proud she was of me, how she saw my strength and creativity, how she hoped I would escape and build a beautiful life. She had known. She had seen what was happening, and even though she couldn't save me herself before she passed, she had tried to leave me messages of hope. I keep those letters in a special box on my bookshelf, and I read them whenever I need to remember that I was loved, truly loved, by at least one member of my family. The photography career I had barely dared to dream about became real. I got an agent. I started getting commissioned for editorial work, for advertising campaigns, for book covers, but the work I was most proud of remained the documentary projects with survivors. I photographed women leaving domestic violence shelters, holding their children's hands, stepping into new apartments with nothing but donated furniture and an ocean of hope. I photographed men who had been abused by their parents, standing in places that represented their freedom. I photographed teenagers who had been kicked out for being gay or trans, now thriving in chosen families that actually loved them. Every shoot felt like an act of defiance against the idea that abuse has to define you forever. I won awards, small ones at first, from local arts councils and photography organizations, then bigger ones. An emerging artist grant, a feature in a major photography magazine, an invitation to speak on a panel about art and activism. People started recognizing my work, and sometimes they recognized me. More than once, someone came up to me at an exhibition or event and said, "You're Chloe Miller. You're the one who exposed your parents. Thank you. Your story helped me leave my abusive family too." Those moments made everything worth it. Maya graduated from law school at the top of her class and immediately went to work for a firm specializing in family law and domestic violence cases. She told me I had inspired her career choice, that seeing what I went through and how broken the system was made her want to fight for other people who couldn't fight for themselves. She represents abuse survivors in custody battles, helps people get restraining orders, and destroys abusive parents in court. She's terrifying and brilliant, and I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. Liam finished his master's degree and started working for a nonprofit that creates digital resources for abuse survivors, things like apps that help people safely document abuse, websites that connect them with resources, online support groups. He told me that being a witness to what happened to me changed his whole perspective on what he wanted to do with his skills. The three of us have dinner together every week, an unbreakable tradition. They're not just my friends, they're my family, the one I chose, the one that actually shows up for me. I started dating, which was its own terrifying adventure. Therapy helped me understand my patterns, how I had been conditioned to accept mistreatment, how I tended to shrink myself to make other people comfortable, how I had no idea what healthy love actually looked like. I went on some bad dates. I had a few short relationships that didn't work out. And then I met James at a gallery opening, a high school teacher who was funny and kind and patient with my trauma responses. When I flinched the first time, he raised his hand to brush hair out of my face. He stopped, asked if I was okay, and waited for me to tell him it was safe to continue. When I told him about my family, he didn't try to fix it or tell me to forgive them or suggest that surely they meant well. He just listened and believed me and told me I deserved better. We've been together for 8 months now, and I'm learning what it feels like to be loved without conditions. I haven't spoken to my parents since that phone call in the gallery courtyard. My mother served her jail time and was released 4 months ago. I know this because my lawyer informed me, not because she tried to contact me. The restraining order is still in effect for another 8 years, and I plan to renew it when it expires. I heard through the grapevine, meaning my Aunt Susan, who still occasionally talks to my father, that Eleanor and Richard's marriage fell apart. They're divorced now. My father moved to another state to start over, working as a junior accountant at a small firm, his reputation too damaged to ever return to the life he had before. My mother lives alone in a small apartment on the other side of town, estranged from most of her former friends, no longer welcome at the church she once ruled. They both lost everything they cared about, their image, their status, their control over me. I wish I could say I felt happy about their suffering, but mostly I just feel nothing. They're strangers to me now, people I used to know in another lifetime. Sometimes I think about the fact that I don't have parents anymore. Not really, and I feel a twinge of something that might be sadness. But then I look around at the life I've built, at the friends who became family, at the work I'm doing, at the person I'm becoming, and I realize I didn't lose anything real. You can't lose something you never actually had. Last week, I had a piece accepted into a major exhibition at a contemporary art museum. It's a collection of self-portraits I took over the past 2 years, documenting my healing journey. There's the one from right after I left, when I looked hollow and scared. There's one from 6 months later, after the trial, where you can see the first hints of strength returning to my eyes. There's one from my first solo show, where I'm smiling genuinely for the first time in years. And the final one, taken just last month, where I'm standing in front of my bathroom mirror in the morning light. No makeup, hair messy, the scar on my cheek barely visible now but still there. A reminder of where I've been. I'm looking at the camera like I'm looking at a friend. Like I finally recognize, and like the person I see. The series is called Becoming Whole. The museum opening is next month. They're flying in press from major publications. It's the biggest opportunity of my career so far, and I earned it. Not because of my last name or my parents' connections or because I played by someone else's rules. I earned it because I survived, because I found my voice, because I turned my pain into purpose, and because I refused to let the people who were supposed to love me convince me I was worthless. I'm 26 years old now. I have a career I love, friends who are family, a partner who respects me, a therapist who helps me heal, and a future that's entirely my own. I have a scar on my face that tells a story I'm no longer afraid to share. I have a voice that gets stronger every day. And I have the knowledge that I don't need my parents' approval or love or acknowledgement to know that I have value, that I matter, that I deserve good things. Sometimes people ask me if I think my parents will ever apologize, ever acknowledge what they did, ever try to make amends. I used to spend so much energy hoping for that, fantasizing about the day my mother would break down and admit she was wrong, that she had hurt me, that she was sorry. But I don't wait for that anymore. Their apology isn't mine to control, and my healing doesn't depend on receiving it. I've given myself the apology they'll never give me. I've forgiven myself for not leaving sooner, for believing their lies about me, for thinking I deserved the way they treated me. That's the only forgiveness that matters. There are still hard days. Days when I hear my mother's voice in my head telling me I'm not good enough. Days when I doubt my decisions or worry that I'm being selfish or wonder if I overreacted. Days when I see a mother and daughter laughing together in a coffee shop and feel that stab of grief for something I'll never have. But those days are getting fewer and farther between, and I have tools now to handle them. I have people to call. I have coping strategies. I have the evidence, literal video evidence, that what happened to me was real and wrong and not my fault. I also have hope. Not the naive hope I had as a child, believing that if I just tried hard enough, my parents would love me the way I needed. Real hope. Hope that comes from knowing I survived the worst thing that ever happened to me and came out stronger. Hope that comes from building something beautiful from the wreckage. Hope that comes from knowing that the rest of my life is going to be nothing like the first 24 years. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If you're in a toxic relationship, whether with a parent, a partner, a friend, or anyone else, and you're reading this wondering if what you're experiencing counts as abuse, if you're being too sensitive, if you should just try harder to make it work, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You don't deserve to be treated like you're worthless. And you don't owe anyone, not even family, access to you if they're hurting you. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve people who celebrate you instead of tearing you down. And you deserve the chance to build a life where you're not just surviving, but actually thriving. Leaving is hard. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. You might lose people. You might lose your sense of who you are for a while. You might question everything. But I promise you, on the other side of that fear is freedom. Real freedom. The freedom to be yourself without apology. The freedom to make choices based on what you want, not what someone else demands. The freedom to discover that you're so much stronger and more capable than you ever knew. The freedom to live a life that's actually yours. It's been 2 years since the night my mother attacked me with broken glass, and I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. Healing isn't linear. I still have trauma responses. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still struggle with setting boundaries and advocating for myself. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. And every single day, I'm building a life that would have been impossible if I had stayed in that house, accepting that treatment, believing the lies they told me about who I was. You know what the best revenge actually is? It's not destroying the people who hurt you, though watching them face consequences was satisfying. The best revenge is living so fully and authentically that they become completely irrelevant to your story. They're the prologue, the thing you survived so you could get to the actual good parts. And I'm living in the good parts now. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between staying in a toxic situation or stepping into an uncertain future? Have you ever had to choose yourself when everyone told you that was selfish? Have you ever discovered that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally actually loved you with more conditions than you could ever meet? If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because I'm going to keep sharing my journey, keep documenting what healing looks like, and keep proving that you can build an extraordinary life from the ashes of a painful past. Drop a comment and tell me your story, or just let me know you're here and you're trying. This community we're building matters, your voice matters, you matter. And if you're still in that dark place, the one where you can't see a way out, where you think you deserve the treatment you're getting, where you believe you're too broken or too weak or too dependent to leave, I need you to know something. You're wrong. You're stronger than you think. You're more valuable than they've told you. And there's a whole life waiting for you on the other side of fear. All you have to do is take the first step. I did it. Thousands of others have done it. And so can you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, you don't owe anyone your suffering. Not even family. Especially not family. Now go live the life you deserve.